What was the meaning of conquering to Istanbul in the world history?
I'm sorry?
The conquering to Istanbul, Fatih Sultan Mehmed has conquered.
Yeah.
What was the meaning of that for world history? What's changed?
Yeah. Well, one of the largest or most powerful dynasties or empires was a remnant of the Greek and Roman empires, which was the Byzantine centered in Constantinople. So Constantinople was extremely powerful, surrounded by a formidable wall, surrounded on one side by the Bosphorus, the water. So natural, defense lines. And the Ottomans, as a matter of fact, spread beyond Constantinople before they were able to breach the city, which had access to the open waters at the time. So, of course, breaching those walls and finally subduing Constantinople, and which became Istanbul, by 1453 was a historic feat. It did not come easy. It had to do with making use of artillery, but also a sustained siege, which commands a lot of energy and high level of loyalty and an entire campaign of supplying your soldiers and making sure they stick with it until it is completed. And of course, to their credit, when the Ottomans entered the city, they did not destroy and pillage the whole city, which in itself an accomplishment. That's what soldiers did. Again, this is an Islamic, in keeping with Islamic customs. They knew that the patriarch inside the city is a monotheist. They actually engaged in trade with them in one way or the other during the siege and before. And the city basically transformed, and its population increased, and the Christian and Jewish minorities in it flourished for a long time. So Christianity and Judaism, Jewish traditions continued in the city to this day, of course. But opening Constantinople was although in itself did not bring devastation on the Orthodox Christians of the city or the Jewish inhabitants, it jolted the rest of Europe into mobilizing to deal with this Eastern menace called Islam, which they did not understand. So hence this East-West conflict took on a new dimension. So as a matter of fact, during Ottoman period is when Orientalism, as we understand it today, became was animated. The idea that how the West views the East as its contestant other, as Edward Said explains.
When the Ottoman took to the Caliphate, they make it grow up, or the Caliphate became weak. What's changed?
Well, the Caliphate, or the first four caliphs in Islam, is an idealized period in Islam. Those were the contemporaries of the Prophet. They knew him personally. All of them were revered. All of them were men of letters, and they adhered to the early, simplest, perhaps, teachings of Islam, or in its purest sense. After that period, because the Prophet likely on purpose did not designate a successor, and instead instructed that they discuss the matter and decide among themselves, created problems, of course. So what happened to the Caliphate during Ottoman time? I think it was a time of diversification of rule, whereby the Sheikh of Islam became an independent office from the Sultan, but remained a source of religious authority, whereas the Sultan became the source of administrative and military authority. And they both lived in a balance. And you could find that balance in the high periods of Islamic rule. It's always a negotiation between a semi-secular tinge or economic or early capitalist administration and religious one. And they always kept each other in balance. So Islam could accommodate to changing times that way. And I think in the Middle East and Turkey and elsewhere, that negotiation remains intact. As a matter of fact, if you forward to the present and what became of the caliphate or this negotiation between semi-secular or secular administrative life and Islamic jurisprudence, Turkey is leading the way because it is explored. Its experiment with democracy as such is longer than any other country in the Middle East. And despite the problems currently, people are navigating those two trends, Islam and modernity, more successfully than elsewhere. And I hope it remains that way, that it remains peaceful, and so that other countries can draw lessons.
Who is your favorite sultan?
Suleiman al-Qanuni, Suleiman the lawgiver.
Yeah, could you, my question will not be in the movie, so
Yeah.
if you answer that my favorite sultan is like this because your favorite sultan, according to you, who is your favorite? And
Well, I like several of them, to be honest with you. Selim III, for example, is the one who made the serious effort towards modernization. Of course, he was rebuffed by the Janissary. It took Murad IV to complete the task. But all of them basically understood the need for drilling in different fashion, for the army and to advance forward. Of course, the zenith of Ottoman life took place during the reign of Suleiman al-Qanuni, or Suleiman the lawgiver. That's when jurisprudence, interpretations of the Quran itself, and civil life basically became nuanced. You have semblances of the need, implementation of civil law that granted equality across divides, even across class, not just ethnicity, which did not mean too much during that time. But it also made the central government powerful, such that there was a period of stability that reigned across the empire, notwithstanding skirmishes with the Persians to the east. But that was a period of stability where people had enough food on the table. They can engage in all manners of artistic expressions, poetry, high culture, the arts. So that stability is actually is what dynasties strive for in their lifetime. So that's why it's my favorite period.
Well, what was the reason that that small tribe in Ottoman, Osman Gazi and Orhan Gazi, all, how they grow up so fast, do you think?
I think it was a combination of things. There was a void, a cultural and military void by Mongol invasions. And most of all, it was a keen grasp of the tenets of Islam and using those to create a dynastic legacy. There are rules within Islam that lend themselves to order, law and order. But then they progress beyond that, and their Ottoman or Turkish cultural narratives were woven into Islam in order to create a very tight-knit dynasty in a sphere of decline on both sides, on the European side and to the east, of course. And they can only grow, so they kept gaining territory, and it was a process of successful delegation of authority and property to subordinates and family members, while commanding their loyalty to the central government that allowed for this expansion. And the rest, of course, is well-placed marriages on the European side. But then the Ottomans understood that their depth lies to the east, where the source of Islam is, because Europe was very backward at the time. So, and then the Ottomans spread eastward until they ran into the Persians and the eastern fringes. But they never abandoned, of course, and they understood the importance of extending their influence over the holiest places in Islam, in Palestine and mostly in Western Saudi Arabia, in Mecca and Medina.
According to you, what's the meaning of civilizations, and how the Ottoman became civilizations? What you are thinking, their civilizational improvements and developing and success?
Well, I'm not an expert on ancient Turkish culture. It is a very ancient culture that actually predates Islam itself, as does Arabic culture, by the way. The language itself predates Islam. However, Islam outstretched Arabism and Turkism and even Persian narratives. So what makes a civilization is the successful process of extending stability from a central government to the fringes, where people can function and engage in high culture successfully in relative stability, and also engage in commerce. Of course, Europeans have very different views on the meaning of civilization, which were subordinated to expansion that made enslavement a focal point, frankly, for their commerce. It was through slavery that they expanded their reign and massive wealth by forcing the locals to mine for gold and silver, and also engage in farming and agriculture on their behalf, namely, from deer skin to beaver skin and to tobacco and sugar and molasses, etc., etc. So, but Orientalism, the essence of Orientalism, has to do with a competition between two different perceptions of civilization. And the West has always been keen, or many parts of the West, to varying degrees at different times, insisted that they are the standard of civilization, until it became, boiled down to essentially eating with a fork and knife, as opposed to by your hands, not by how many people you killed before or after dinner. The Ottoman Empire did not embark in its entire history on a massive program of killing or eradicating any part of its subjects. Whereas, World War I, which was a European problem, claimed the lives of upward of 18 to 20 million people. And they did the same thing in World War II in the name of civilization. And slavery itself was justified as, a white man's burden to spread civilization and teach the, people outside the Western Hemisphere how to conduct their lives, how to think, how to behave, how to dress. That was civilization to the West. Whereas in the East, it has to do with a very, very deep understanding of culture, of cultural traits that beyond conquest. So this is basic differences. So outside the Mongol invasion, you couldn't find periods in history in the Near East, within the Ottoman realm, or before that, Islamic civilizations, whereby ethnic cleansing was practiced on a massive scale. It was about absorption. Enter the realm of explorations, and you have the eradication of entire cultures from South America to Africa to the Far East. And of course, all that was a prelude.
Okay.
Well, to take the example of the United States, for example, when it comes to defining civilization or, writing that into your narrative, that became a big topic during the Spanish-American War, 1898. And that war was carried out in the name of civilization. So the Americans found it necessary to flex their muscles and enter the imperialist age. So in order to satisfy its economic needs, as was the case with Europe, beginning with the age of explorations, raw material, silver, gold, beaver skin, you name it, and sugar, so that they can carry on with their civilized life and wear those fancy hats in Europe. The US found it necessary to inherit, as a matter of fact, inherited the white man burden, that idea that Northwestern Europeans are endowed with a gift that they have to basically go beyond their borders, go to Africa and elsewhere in the world, and spread this civilization, which is boiled down to a mode of dress, maybe speaking the conqueror's language only, and adhering to their religion, which is mostly either Catholicism or Protestantism. All that in the name of civilization. But, one argument, for civilization outside these Western models can be made on behalf of ancient African civilizations. 20,000 years before those rudimentary laws began in the Middle East, which spread to Europe and became the foundation for European civilization. You have complex societies made up of 20,000 people or so, organized along hierarchy that made sense, from a central location to farming and hunters and gatherers, who functioned as a coherent society, living in perfect harmony with their environment. Precisely what the indigenous people of North America did for 10,000 years or 11,000 years before Europeans arrived. And in 200 short years, they decimated the people, their resources, the environment. They overfished, they overhunted, and the people of this continent, as is the case with South America, dwindled from millions to mere hundreds of thousands.
When I was in all communist countries, when I went to their library, they were writing that because some parts of Ottoman have been Ottoman were barbarian. They come and they kill everybody here. They are the civilization, not the state. Only have sword and kill. They didn't have a state system. They are not well organized. Some ignore people are thinking this. According to you, Ottoman power was only the fighting war, or they had some good architecture or some state system, organization. Could you talk in this?
Well, depending on what period you're talking about in this long Ottoman history, statecraft was the essence of Ottoman success to begin with. So, and that can hardly happen if you engage in irrational violence and conquest against your own subjects. It wouldn't be an empire per se. It could not exist under those circumstances. And that's what distinguishes Ottoman realm on history and narrative from European explorations, which were in competition with each other, which basically sought to subvert the environment and the people, the conquered people, for its economic needs. It was a one-way exchange, whereas in the Ottoman Empire and beyond, it was a two-way street. You enter a period of conflict, yes, which is violent, yes, but the violence ends and the outcome is some kind of coexistence, whereby those conquered people become very much intrinsic part of your dynasty, of your realm. Some of who were taken into, forcible military service, themselves become the leaders and even sultans and governors. None of that happened when Europeans encountered non-Europeans, whether in Africa, in South America, in North America, in the Middle East later on, or in the Far East. So racial difference was emphasized in that relationship, and it became a perpetual relationship of power, of conquest. So those folks were looked at as two arms to do all kinds of deeds on behalf of the Europeans for economic gains. So that is a major difference between the spread of Ottoman Empire or the influx of Europeans in the Americas and the Far East and Africa.